Today's guest, Felix Rösner, is co-founder of Marble, a company that makes it possible to see and optimize the invisible parts of enterprise workflows. From deploying AI solutions at Fortune 100 companies to building digital workers that automate revenue workflows, Felix has seen why most automation efforts fall short. They skip the hard part, which is understanding how work actually happens. At Marble, he's fixing that by making hidden workflows visible before automation ever begins. In this episode, he shares how his team helps companies unlock operational clarity, move faster post-merger, and treat operations like a living system. Felix, welcome to Just Curious.
100%. So great. So great to be here, Stu.
Let's start at the beginning. Can you introduce yourself? Who is Felix Rosner, and what is Marble?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm Felix from Germany originally. You're working kind of like in the AI application space, I would say, for the last 4 years. First worked like quite deeply in conversational intelligence at like a company in London. Then moved to San Francisco and joined X back then, where we deployed a lot of we're really looking to like redefine what like a digital worker is. So we deployed like very complex workflows in the go-to-market and customer support stack at large organizations. And done that for 1 year. Really saw like the immense potential of those agents, but also kind of recognized where stuff was falling short, specifically in terms of like the actual workflow integration. So decided to kind of leave and build my own company since since half a year or 5 months right now, which is Marble. And with Marble, we're exactly focusing on that. We build AI clones of organizations, we call them, where we process thousands of hours of like real work and build like so to say digital twins that give organizations like a very clear overview of like what are people actually doing, where are time and resources being lost, and also like how to win them back. And only when we have this very clear understanding, we move forward with building the automations, which then allows us to not need consultants, not need forward deployed engineers, but we really, be able to deploy data backed and very accurate automations.
You said that context and not tools is the last real moat in AI. Can you unpack that idea for us? Why is deep organizational understanding suddenly so valuable?
Yeah, so I think in general, if we zoom out a bit and look at the landscape of AI powered technology, and if we think about workflow builders such as internal tool builders, or in general application builders such as Lovable, Retool, or even like stuff like Cursor or computer use, we can really see like essentially we're getting to a place where you can build anything you really want as long as you know what you put into this like little prompt window. And I'm someone that is like very like bullish on the further kind of progress of this technology. So I think when it comes to the world of software engineering and building applications, we'll come to a world of like tech abundance. So in this world, like the only thing that then matters is deeply understanding the job to be done, like deeply understanding the problem that you want to be solving and the product that you want to be building. And I think this will be the mode of organizations, and that this will be like also the clear, differentiator of the organizations that are, making it, that are able to transitioning into like, an AI enabled organizations, and organizations that are, maybe left behind. So that's kind of the thinking that we have at Marble around this.
Yeah, and to do so, you're focused on instrumenting workflows, understanding how organizations work. Tell us a little bit about what instrumenting workflows means in practice. Like how do you capture and use that information to create a model of real work?
Yeah, so if you would ask like a lot of like whether it's like restructuring firms, whether it's like very operational heavy PEs, or whether it's just like other owners and leaders of companies, they would all be thinking that they have like a very good understanding of kind of initially of how work is being done in the organizations where people spend their time, etc. But once you dig more in, you realize that all this understanding is really based on them, having catch-ups or interviews with their team leads, their leadership, and really most of it is like anecdotally driven. It's not really data based. And in order to really like think about automation, like implementing agents that take over entire workflows from end, you cannot just like sprinkle some AI on something that you like broadly understand where the problem is. You need to very granularly go bottom up. So really understand what the individual operator on the computer is doing and what all the variations of one specific task and workflow are, where are decision nodes, etc. So how we are going about it is that we are really going to the core source of everything. We are capturing keystroke data, screen data of those operators, like thousands of hours, and then run our own models on top of this data and kind of build process maps, cluster different processes together. We kind of build like a high level overview of where time is being spent, but then we can also like zoom in and really understand, hey, what are the differentiations of how person A and person B handle the process, what works better, where's friction, etc. So you can really think of it as like a very granular clone of how work is being done.
Yeah, and we're going to share an example of your work with a PE-backed roll-up and how much work turned out to be redundant. I'm curious, what insight led you to this opportunity? How did you have a sense that a lot of work was, or maybe better said, how did you have a sense that people's understanding of what was being done was not correct?
Yeah, so it's actually initially when we started Marble, we did have like a slightly different focus. So our first thought was, we are from from Germany. We have like the thing called like German Mittelstand, which is essentially like, a huge amount of like large industrial companies that a lot of them are private that really haven't really adopted any technology the last 20, 30 years. And if we want to save the German industry and economy, we kind of have to go in there. So that's what we did. We sat down with a lot of like, transformation leaders or with a lot of like also CEOs of those companies. So we wanted to see like, hey, which type of like back office processes can we automate? So we started to get into conversations in service industry and construction and manufacturing. Um, we went onto calls. We met them like five, six times. They shared their screen with their SAP interface. After 5, 6 calls, we still looked each other in the eyes and we said like we don't really know. Like we know kind of what the problem is, but we have no idea like how to like approach this automation. We would need like a lot more data on like how the process actually looks like. So I realized, hey, the only real way to do this is to kind of travel there, kind of consultancy or forward deployed engineering style, sit next to the operator and just watch them for a few days, a week or so. We thought that this is not really like in the world of like where we live in today, where we have all this technology like available, like manually shadowing people in order to understand something that's happening on a computer doesn't seem like a very logical approach. So this is really like how we started to get into it. We talked to like a bunch of other like vertical AI companies and their forward deploying engineering teams to kind of understand how they're doing it. And we realized, hey, everyone really has like the same problem. It is just so much manual work. So we looked at it like from a very first principle perspective, and we're like, hey, like why do I need to sit next to this person if I can just record everything that they're doing? And this is really how it started. And of course, we took a step back. Then I thought, like, hey, let's reevaluate who would be like great, partners to build this product with and to kind of go to market. And we realized that, a very specific point in time where people want to, you know, make or initiate a lot of change in an organization, make it more efficient, etc., is when there's ownership change, when someone new comes into the company. So this is exactly why then we went towards like very operational PEs. And why we went towards roll-ups, because they acquired a company, they have like the strict 50, 100-day timelines where they need to show, hey, those are my initiatives. This is like kind of the efficiency gain that I can pull out of those initiatives, and that's where we were starting.
Cool. You mentioned earlier that the term AI clones, that your process of instrumenting workflows creates models, these AI clones of human workflows. What exactly is a AI clone in this context, and what makes it different from a process diagram or a task list?
Yeah, so I mean, process diagrams and also task lists, like most of them just are not. If every process diagram would be backed by real data, those would be great diagrams. The
Right.
problem is that none of them really are. So I think this is like a first piece, right? So essentially, everything we do is backed by real data. Plus, we then also like add another layer. We don't just map stuff. We also kind of analyze what we have mapped. We realize where people spend time. We realize exactly how a process looks like and what specific quantifiable impact automating this process would have, because we own the data. Like if we know like your team is spending like 500 hours on account reconciliation every month, then we can give you pretty clear ROI how the world would look like if we could automate it for you. So I think really carrying this end to end from understanding to automating is like what really differentiates us, not only versus like process tasks, process diagrams or tasks, but also from like vertical AI companies, from consultancies, from task mining kind of Celonis like companies, and from also custom kind of software development shops. So yeah, we really want to put like data at the center of everything and of every decision that's being made.
How do you strike the balance between deeply observing work and respecting privacy, like especially in high compliance environments?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's very important to be like extremely upfront about that. I think you can kind of differentiate that question into two parts. So one is like really just like even like the ethical part of, how do I manage like employees not feeling watched, right? Essentially. And here we are never showing any employee ID specific data. So we are really looking on, that's why we also go into bigger organizations. So we're looking at teams, we're looking at aggregating processes, aggregating the work that's being done. And we would never go like, hey, this person is doing uh, a lot of cigarette breaks or coffee breaks or whatever. So we are not like a workforce monitoring surveillance tool, and we don't offer that dashboard, even though some PEs are a bit sad about that. But we really don't want that. And then from like the compliance piece is it was basically like the first customers that we have were like in a pretty highly regulated space. So becoming PII compliant, working on like a PII redaction pipeline that runs on their, for instance, AWS instances was like, one of the first things that we did. So making sure that we don't process or transfer any data that's like sensitive and that shouldn't kind of leave the environment of our customers was high priority.
Yeah. Before we get into like a case study, what kinds of signals or symptoms tell you an organization doesn't really understand its operations well enough?
Yeah. So I think it's very and I can talk about that that's in the case study, but I think it's very obvious when you understand or when you just ask leadership, like, a how what are you what are your people doing the entire day, right? And what initiatives have you taken to kind of structure that day? And the reality is most of them will point at some kind of very outdated documentation, if there is any, that's been floating around. Or the answer number two would be like, hey, let me ask this person and circle back. So it's really just being in a conversation with them and understanding, do they understand the status quo, plus what have they done to change the status quo in the past year or so. And if the answer is hire consultants, then most of the time they don't really understand themselves what's been going on.
Yeah. And maybe zooming out a bit, what kinds of companies benefit most from this approach? Like who feels the pain most acutely when context is missing?
Yeah, so I mean, quite typically. I mean, there's a wide range of companies there. I think that you can differentiate kind of by industry, and of course, like companies where, yes, let's say typical back office white collar work is like the strongest value driver. There we have like an incredibly high impact on margins and then also costs if we work with them. So think about any type of white collar service, support, collections, staffing, agencies, where most of the work is just being done in front of the computer. That's also what's driving the cost then. And on the other hand, I think there's also certain like timings that align where we say, hey, this is like where the companies they want to work with. It's really from a PE level, for instance, carve out situations, turnaround situations, roll ups. So essentially all kinds of company that just went through like a structural ownership change, but that have like a pressure to act, whether this is due to kind of financial distress or whether this is due to like them having to carve out their operations from the main company, or just companies that drive a buy and build strategy that just want to conglomerate a lot of top line under one roof. And this just drives them to action. And this and we can go into the case study a bit deeper into like what that specifically means, but this is kind of the signals that we are looking for.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's jump into that case study. So you mentioned to me an example of a PE-backed roll-up. Tell us about the problem they came to you with, and then let's tell the story.
Yeah, 100%. So essentially, it kind of as it mentions like a roll up company, rolling up like large service or white collar service companies. I think starting in collection and staffing. They essentially buy companies range of 400 to couple thousand employees, and their whole um, idea is, of course, to kind of um, buy those companies and kind of streamline kind of the infrastructure around them. So really like finding synergies between in the operations and really also applying AI to make those companies more efficient. And it's like an amazing customer. It's like probably one of the highest talent dense teams that I've been working with, both from like a finance perspective, but also from like an engineering perspective. But just the reality is that if you're like, you know how PEs work, they're not like huge teams, right? They're like 15, 20, 50 people in the operations teams max. If they acquire a company that's like 500 or more and 1,000 of them, then they just don't have enough capacity to actually truly understand and shadow the people and understand like what's been going on there. So, and they came to us with kind of one team in mind. It was like kind of a client services team. It's like 50 people. And they were like, hey, we don't really know what those people are doing the entire day. They're all working in like super kind of legacy tech stacks, and we want to understand like how we can. We have the feeling that there's a lot of repetition going on in the day-to-day work, but we want to know like if there's any potential to save costs and save work, and also let them refocus on more strategic work after that. So this was kind of the initial starting point of the conversation, and since then, yeah, we're looking at other teams also in this organization and building the first automations.
So with that problem, where did you start when diagnosing the workflow issues? Like, what told you where to look first?
Yeah, so of course, like in this specific case, but also in PEs, there is like this very high level understanding of, from a due diligence process of like where there's broadly kind of efficiency gains to be assumed. So most of the times, like there are a good start to kind of identify the first team to look at, right? Like at the end of the day, you can look at the org chart, you can see like where the most people are. PEs are mostly companies that are interested in driving like don't looking at like the small screws too, but they're looking at like the big value levers in
Right.
organizations. Most of the times you have a really good understanding and like where to, let's say, start. And then it's really about capturing data. So we first initially also didn't really look or didn't really know like what processes are we looking at, etc. But that was also not our jobs, because that's what our technology does, right? So we deployed the agents on like the devices of the people, and we captured like 10,000s of hours of work, which then gave us like a very granular understanding of like, hey, which tool stack are people spending time on, which tasks are people spending time on, and then allowed us to kind of dive deeper into those specific tasks in order to build like models also of how to automate.
How do you deploy that capture stack without raising red flags around surveillance or compliance? Like, what does that look like in practice? Yeah, I'm just curious, like how people respond to a process like this.
Yeah, it's funny because like our initial like MVP when we first started did actually require the operators to kind of start recording themselves, right? So it wasn't even like on their desktop, but it was like, think of like we're in a Zoom meeting right now and you want to share your screen. And we were also worried about like, hey, I hope that people have the agency to do that or they feel like comfortable with it. The reality is they're so fed up by like this work like similarly to bottom up. So they do like repetitive work, data entry work the entire day, and they were actually quite relieved that someone actually comes in and tries to like take that work away from them, because it's not like they have nothing else on their plate. So it
Mhm.
was actually we got really, really high adoption through that. Still at the end of the day, we decided to move towards like a desktop client that's like less intrusive, because it just allows us to get like a to also don't annoy them anymore, like having to start the recording, stop the recording, etc. And so most of the times we just go through the IT department. We are kind of compliant. We don't we don't do any performance evaluation, etc. We also don't show kind of the leadership or the PEs like very, PII data or data that lets them identify individual employees. So we can go. We are quite straightforward with that. It's not really like a big problem. Of course, we also published white papers about security and also our approach there, our technology deployed there. But we don't really feel like a lot of pushback. After all, if we think about it, it's not like a new kind of technology of like recording and understanding someone's screen. It's really just about the purpose that you do it for. If we think about a lot of kind of security tools that sit on people's computer, if we think about even like the UiPaths, Celonis's of this world that are doing like a similar approach, they kind of commoditize this approach, I would say, like already years ago. So the amount of pushback that we receive is quite limited.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about what you do with all the data that you collect. I guess, firstly, how much data, and maybe thought more so in time, like how many days are you kind of recording people's workflows, and then what do you do with that information?
Yeah. So I mean, we are like we don't deploy like on a specific amount, like for 2 weeks only, and then we stop, because we also want to see kind of the impact of our automations, and also like how the day-to-day work changes once our automations deployed. So you can think of us, we want to be like at the end of the day a control tower of like how humans work together with agents. So it's not like a one and done kind of project. I would say like the first really meaningful good results you get after like a couple of weeks of full recording, where you get like a first understanding of like, hey, what are the areas that we zoom into. Then of course it kind of depends on the workflows that we're looking at. Some of the workflows that we only identify after a month or so, because especially in the finance departments, they're just very seasonal workflows, right? There's month end closing, quarter end, etc., which of course we have to observe multiple times to really make sense of it. And the more data we get in, the more really granular we understand this workflow. Because if you think about, putting an invoice into your accounting systems, you usually have like 20 different items in the drop down menu that you choose from. And you have in your head like a certain rule that kind of guides you to choose one of the drop downs there. But in order for us to understand it, we of course uh, 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 have to analyze a lot of occurrences of the same workflow to really be able to portray all the edge cases and all the decision nodes that you have during this. Once we have reached this, and this is then, depends on like 1,000 occurrences, 500 occurrences, really depends on like the variety of the workflow. Then we're really able to translate our understanding into like a very programmatic specification of like how an automation would look like and which rules the agent would be following once we deploy that. So it's really like having this information allows us to not need any FDEs, not need any consultants whatsoever in order to deploy agents.
And tell me what insights you shared with the leadership. What came out of this capturing of the and instrumentation of the workflows? What did you find?
Yeah, so I mean, multiple things. So I think there's like a first kind of surprising finding was that in order to like a lot of efficiency gains that we were able to unlock wasn't even through automations, right? So you would think like you have to build complex agents and like agentic workflows or workflow automation, etc. But a lot of it was just, we've watched like a workflow of 500 and this person or like person XYZ or like, ID number XYZ did it like 5 times quicker than the other person. And just sharing those best practices within a team. I think we saw like cases of like where people copy pasted like a bunch of stuff from like their own database into Excel and then back into the sheet. And another person just built like a little kind of internal tooling to do it for them. And just democratizing this knowledge already saved like so much time. And in the second piece is we were able to show them where people spend time, and then also give them like very clear business cases and plans on what we take on together next. So we look at automating their account reconciliation process now, for instance, which they spend like hundreds of hours with every month. So those are just like very actionable insights that we can say, hey, we're deploying that for you. We will start deploying that for the first customers in a couple of weeks, and we have a very granular understanding, and we can back it with data, how much time it will save you.
Yeah. And so approximately how much time are we talking about when it comes to a case study like this? Like what what was sort of the kind of before and after? If you had to like pitch that to a skeptical operations leader.
Yeah. So I mean, of course, like you cannot. I mean, that's like the first thing is we don't want to like do empty promise. That's the whole idea of our approach, right? Anyone that comes to you and just like shoots like a random number of like percentage of time saved for your project, without them actually understanding the project, I would feel it's like a first red flag. But I mean, in specific case, right? So only for the instance of this account reconciliation piece, it's like 100 hours a month plus, it's like 120 hours a month, and in total, I think from this 50 people team, we hope to get like give them 250 hours every month back.
You found 40% of work was redundant. What kinds of tasks are we talking about? And how did you help teams act on that insight?
Yeah. So first of all, I mean, the task that we look at is like it's really like 80% of this is either like data entry into like some old legacy system and managing inbound email requests, right? So for instance, an email comes in with a power of attorney certificate. They have to they have to copy everything out, go into the database, put the data back in, then send like this takes like 10 minutes, then send them like an email of like, hey, we just actioned the request, thank you so much for sending. So this whole process takes 20 minutes, and it's so standardized it should take 2. And
Yeah.
those are kind of the pieces that we want to go after. Or for instance, people like in debt collections, people would ask them, hey, what's my balance? I've paid this stuff. Then they go into the internal database, which is super legacy, which takes forever to load. They pull like a account overview for them, then they send it back, and then they email for them back because some people are still not happy with the response, etc. So it's really like those cases that are customer facing, but that are just occur in such a high frequency that you can easily standardize them. And really surfacing this and automating this is like the biggest value lever, because you don't want to take away their time doing like actual strategic work, actually managing customer relationships, actually hopping on a call with them to kind of, discuss matters of strategic importance. So those are kind of the pieces that we look at, and how we action upon those is, as I mentioned, there's two pieces. Like one is just typical transformation, or you can even call it like democratizing best practices or new processes. So there might be cases that don't require actual automations, that just require like knowledge sharing or like documentation that can be shared within the team, so they understand like, hey, this is how I can do this task more efficiently. And the other piece is just like very specific automations, and we are leveraging computer use for that, for software that does not have APIs. For instance, we leverage like the n8ns of this world, the retools of this world, to kind of build internal tools for them. So we really want to be like on the back end of all things in the automation level, very agnostic, because I mentioned, like, I believe that like technology will innovate so quickly on this layer that I don't want to be locked in with a specific proprietary tech stack or tool stack.
This has been a super interesting conversation. As we come to a close, love to get your perspectives on some advice for operations leaders who are curious about whether this could be beneficial to them. What's an immediate step a COO or an operations leader could take tomorrow to get a clear picture of how their organization actually works?
Yeah, it sounds so cliche probably, but actually talk to the people that are doing the day-to-day work. And don't try to get like an understanding through leadership or through like, team leads, VP level, etc. But go to the real people, because they will tell you, A, that they don't have any like political interest in it. Right? They will tell you just what they've been doing all day and what they've seen not working, what working very well. And so really using this a lot more, specifically in the world of private equity and of private equity roll-ups, etc. So really go to the people rather than just relying on kind of, leadership, etc. Because they all have like a certain interest in portraying the reality and the way that benefits them the most.
Yeah. Felix, thank you so much for coming by. Just curious.
Thank you so much. It was a great pleasure.